So what did you check out this month?
I watched a movie called Valerie and Her Week of Wonders from 1970. This was a Czech movie that I'd always heard of and always wanted to see because it sounded like something that could be really cool, but I didn't want to buy it because it sounded like something I could really hate. I figured it would be one or the other. It turned out to be kind of in the middle. It reminded me of Black Moon, which I talked about last month, which was kind of like an adult version of Alice in Wonderland. This movie was about this young girl who lives in a town where vampires arrive and weird stuff happens. It's not as abstract as I kind of thought it was going to be. It does have much more of a story than Black Moon did, but it was still weird. It wasn't as exploitative as I was expecting, so that was good. I was afraid it was going to be just an excuse for a bunch of nudity and random nonsense, but it wasn't. It's a weird movie to talk about. It definitely had more style than Black Moon. There were some parts of it that I thought were cool, but overall, it never really pulled me in that much. I was never really invested with anything that was going on. It was interesting enough to keep me watching, but once it was over, I said, I'm glad I didn't buy that, because I will never watch it again. So I don't know, it was okay. If you want to see a girl make out with a guy that she thinks is her dad, but turns out to be a vampire, then this is the movie for you. It definitely felt like it was supposed to be kind of metaphorical for sexual awakening or something like that, for, going through puberty and stuff, but in a way that by the time it was done made me say, what was the point? And I know some people, if there are people who have seen this movie, they're going to comment and say, you didn't get like whatever, blah, 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 but I honestly don't care. The movie didn't interest me that much. I think the girl might have died partway through the movie, and the rest of it was her, I don't know, dreaming or being in the afterlife or something. I honestly don't care. I know it's based on a book. It wasn't super interesting to me. I thought it was just okay. I watched a movie from 1975 called Picnic at Hanging Rock. I seem to watch a lot of Australian movies for some reason, so this was another one. This movie was another one that I'd heard of and wanted to see for a long time. It's about a group of girls that go on a picnic with their school, and some of them kind of wander off around this rock formation and disappear. And the movie is people trying to figure out what happened to them, where they are, some people trying to go looking for them, and kind of showing what effects it has on some of the other people at the school. I thought it was interesting that they never really bring up the parents of the girls. You never find out what they're going through, at least not that I remember. I did enjoy this movie. I liked that they never explained everything. You do kind of get a little bit more as the movie goes on in terms of, I don't know, the other characters experience what the girls went through, and one of them does come back, but you never find out what's happening. And the ones that come back don't seem to remember everything that happened, but they seem sort of traumatized, and they have like cuts and bruises and stuff, but they've been gone long enough that they should be probably dead, because I think it's been long enough that I think it was a couple weeks that they didn't have food or water, but somehow they're still alive. And you never find out what happened, but in a satisfying way. It was intriguing, it was interesting. It's based on a book, and this is a case where I would want to read the book. I was hoping to buy the Criterion that came with the novel, but the one that's out right now doesn't have the novel with it anymore. So yeah, this is a movie that I guess I would recommend. I didn't love it, but I did like it. It was interesting. I watched a French movie from 1978 called The Grapes of Death. Yeah. It was a zombie movie where all the people in this town, kind of out in the middle of nowhere, are turning into zombies because of a pesticide being used on the grapes that are used to make the wine that they drank. They still retain their human intelligence. Some of them even kind of hide the fact that they're affected, but most of them have visible pustules and weird face degeneration going on. It was directed by a guy named Jean Rollin, and I'm not French, so I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. But this was a director that I always got the impression that his movies were all about nudity and gore, and that was going to be it. And for that reason, I always avoided his movies. I always figured there wasn't going to be anything of value in them, and I still probably feel that way, although after watching this one, I would be more willing to watch other movies of his. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. The majority of the movie is just this one girl wandering around, encountering new characters that usually turn out to be infected or whatever, and then killing them and moving on to the next set of characters. In the first half, it was a little boring because so much of it was her literally just running around, to the point where I started fast forwarding because just waiting for her to get to the next scene because she just keeps running around. The effects were cool, I guess. They weren't super realistic, but it was cool to see blood oozing out of people's faces and stuff. I thought it was funny that every time somebody starts going through their degeneration process, it happens right in front of her. It's always like it waits until she gets there. There's multiple scenes where there's a character standing in front of her and their face just starts falling apart while she's watching, and she just kind of stands there, aghast, and there's just blood oozing out of their face. So that was kind of funny. So again, they still have their intelligence. They're kind of actively trying to kill her. There are some interesting deaths in this movie. There was one cool effect where this guy stabs a girl through the torso with a pitchfork into a table, and they hold on the shot of her writhing on the table with a pitchfork sticking through her. And it was cool because the pitchfork isn't moving at all, but you can see her body moving around, and it's sticking into exposed skin, so you can see where she got stabbed and everything. It was an effective effect. And I think what they did was they kept the pitchfork stationary out of frame because you don't see the top of it. And so she's kind of laying between the pitchfork and the table. And it holds on for long enough that you can kind of try to figure out how they did the effect. So I don't know. I wouldn't recommend the movie. It's not interesting enough for that, but I'm glad I watched it. It was interesting, at least, for while it was going on, but it's not something I would ever watch again. And that's all I had time to watch this month. The only thing I read that I finished was Dune, which I reread for the millionth time. And we already talked about that, so I'm not going to go all into that. I do want to say two things that we didn't talk about in our movie video. Number one is that I feel like some of the casting choices were a little bit weird. I don't imagine Josh Brolin as Gurney Halleck when I'm reading the book. We talked about Duncan Idaho. I don't imagine Oscar Isaac as Paul's dad when I'm reading the book. I think William Hurt in the miniseries version was a perfect choice. I thought the miniseries had a lot of good casting choices, even though I went back recently and watched some scenes from it, and it definitely was not as good as I remembered. It felt kind of cheap. And the other thing is that the movie didn't portray the planet as being as dangerous as it feels in the book, where the book talks about how they have to watch every single drop of moisture and conserve everything. But the movie suffers from what I call the Tobey Maguire effect, where the characters take off their mask every 5 seconds, just like Peter Parker did in those Spider-Man movies. And it was really frustrating. The movie has that scene where Paul goes out just in regular clothes, and that one guy's watering the palms, and he says, "You shouldn't be out here like that." But he goes out anyway, and he's fine, and it doesn't seem to affect anything. And I know they really shot out in the desert, and they talked about how they couldn't shoot in the middle of the day because it was too hot, but it doesn't come across in the movie, which is disappointing. But yeah, the book is awesome. To me, it has the best realized world in a sci-fi novel that I've read. It feels like it all makes sense. It feels like it all fits together well. And to me, it really makes it more immersive that way. And it's just really good. So what have you checked out this month?
I watched Looper from 2012, which I remember seeing in theaters.
Yeah, I remember being really disappointed.
It's not bad, but maybe the hype behind it was unjustified. Did it have a lot of hype when it came out?
I think so. I know I was excited because of Brick.
Right.
And I don't know if I had seen The Brothers Bloom, but I like The Brothers Bloom a lot too, which those are all Rian Johnson.
Right.
This was before The Last Jedi, to be clear.
Yeah, it's 2012. I know Joseph Gordon-Levitt had all those prosthetics on to supposedly make him look more like Bruce Willis. One, he doesn't look like Bruce Willis at all, and two, he looks like a monster.
Yeah, I always thought that was a bit pointless.
And that was a selling point when the movie came out. People were like, "You won't believe it." And they were right. I didn't believe how awful it looked.
I remember that the time travel didn't make a lot of sense, or didn't make any sense.
Does it ever?
Rian Johnson's excuse was, that's what he said. He was like, it never makes sense, so, we just make up our own rules. But they don't even stick to their own rules. And again, he kind of said, well, it never makes sense, so just go along with it. But that's not how it works. If time travel is a thing, it has to work a certain way. And even if it's not a thing, there are multiple theories about how it would work. And this movie does not use any of them.
I watched Layer Cake from 2004. Which was a pre-James Bond Daniel Craig movie, but I read that it's credited as giving him an edge to become James Bond.
I tried to watch that one time. I didn't get very far.
I just watched it because it was on. And it was the same guy who did Snatch, right?
It was the same producer, but it was the director of X-Men First Class.
Yeah, so that puts it in top tier. I didn't walk away throwing up, but I didn't walk away whatever the opposite of throwing up is.
Throwing in.
I watched Minority Report from 2002, which was a movie we used to watch quite a bit growing up. And that's a Spielberg movie, early 2000s, and science fiction, and action-y. And those things all combined together make a mechanically constructed movie, but not really a good movie.
It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I remember liking it. But you know how I feel about Spielberg. He always does little things that I really don't like.
I mean, it was based on that Philip K. Dick story.
Yeah, which I'm sure it probably has nothing to do with.
John Williams did the score, but it doesn't feel like a John Williams score. It feels like a more generic score. Tom Cruise doing his normal Tom Cruise stuff, and the technology doesn't really follow logic. The technology follows what would make the movie more dramatic.
And cool and futuristic.
So, for instance, what I think of first is they live in this society with all this crazy, cool everything, basically. But to transfer data to each other, they have to pull out these transparent sheets and carry them over to another computer and stick it in the slot over there instead of, using the internet, which did exist in 2002. My brother and I quote this movie at random intervals. Because Tom Cruise, when he yells, his voice kind of goes high-pitched, so it's easy to mimic by just making your voice high-pitched and not even actually yelling. So there's one part where he goes,
"Where's my minority report? Do I even have one?"
And we use that all the time when we can't find something. So I'll say, "Where are my car keys?"
Do I even have one?
What about the cars? Did the cars make sense? Did they move like magnetically or something?
They're all on tracks. They can move horizontally or vertically, and they switch all the time. And of course, there's one scene where Tom Cruise is jumping from one car to another. I will say the coolest part of that movie, though, was the six sticks. Those batons that are electrified that make you throw up when they hit you. It was awesome. Why haven't we invented those yet?
Yeah, isn't that like what they used in that episode of TNG in that Klingon ceremony for Worf?
Yeah, but they don't hit him in the throat, so he doesn't throw up.
No, it's just because he's so strong, because he's Worf.
Maybe Klingons can't throw up, even with both of their redundant stomachs. I watched Snowpiercer from 2013, which I have seen before, and I think it's a TV series now.
Yeah, on TNT of all places, I think.
I think it's a cool movie. Logically, it doesn't make any sense at all, but as a movie, it's entertaining. As they're going through all the cars and stuff, and they're all unique and different and everything, and there's all these people, but none of the cars have, beds or toilets or anything like that.
I always questioned how they transfer stuff, or how, if you're gonna, you have to go through the cars if you're gonna go from one place to another, but they make it seem like that doesn't happen. Why is the train moving?
I think it generates the heat that they need.
Okay.
Because everything's so cold, including Ed Harris. Man, what a dick. And there's that theory going around that I find interesting about the train being a futuristic version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Have you read that?
No. But I'm not as familiar with Charlie and the Chocolate Factory as you are.
Like how the characters are actually the kids grown up. I watched Labyrinth from 1986, which I probably haven't seen since 1986. The puppetry is really cool, all the production design of everything. David Bowie is kind of a weirdo. And for him being such an awesome musician, the songs in that movie are not very good. Jennifer Connelly
used to be able to act, at least.
But in this one, she talks to the puppets like they're puppets. A little bit condescendingly and like they're little kids, which bothers me a little bit because David Bowie talks to them like they're actual characters. If Jennifer Connelly can talk to bugs realistically, I would think she could talk to a goblin puppet realistically.
You better put the poster up for that because people are going to be like, what the hell are you talking about? Like I was at first.
I think it's one of those movies that just really holds in people's consciousness of growing up, of, oh, I love that movie so much.
Yeah, I always thought The Dark Crystal was better.
I agree.
But I do like that monster thing that she hangs around with a lot. The furry one doesn't have like horns. Is it orange, I think?
Snuffleupagus.
I will say that movie kind of creeped me out as a kid. It feels just real enough that the idea of actually being there was terrifying.
And I think that's something that kids' movies have lost a lot of.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's okay to be scared. It's okay to have things that are a little creepy.
Yeah, you don't have to dumb things down just because it's a kid's movie, whether it's content or tone or anything like that.
I watched Dracula from 1992,
Easily my favorite Dracula movie.
and that's Francis Ford Coppola. But it's weird because the movie shifts between its tone of these weird, cool shots of almost an art movie, but then some of it feels so simple. Like it's someone who just made their first movie and is just out of film school. A lot of the interactions between the characters feels like that. And I will say, Keanu Reeves is so bad in this movie. And I did some background reading, and Coppola said that he basically put him in for his sex appeal.
Yeah.
His accent's so terrible. Like, his acting is so wooden.
Yeah, I've heard a theory that all of his dialogue is dubbed over afterward, and he just wasn't as good at doing that. But I don't think he would have been. I don't think he's a very good actor to begin with, and giving him that accent definitely does not help.
Winona Ryder is also not very good. I think part of it, too, is because Gary Oldman is really good.
Yeah, and Anthony Hopkins in that movie is good too.
That was back when he was trying.
Yeah.
And putting such good actors in scenes with such green actors who don't have the same ability really makes both sides more apparent of how good the good people are and how not great the not great people are. I really like all of the cool effect stuff that they do, especially the way that Coppola chose to do it.
The fact that everything is in camera except for, I think the only thing that's not in camera is the mist when Dracula comes in through the window.
And the monster effects are cool. I think the costume design is really cool.
Yeah, even if it doesn't always make sense.
So there's an anecdote going around, I don't know if it's true or not, that Coppola initially went to a standard special effects group and they told him, you can't do the things you want to do without modern digital effects. And then he fired them. Which would be cool if it was true, but I don't know. It seems like it could have been fabricated.
Yeah, I kind of maybe remember seeing that on the DVD, because I know his son was the one in charge of the effects stuff. I think that might be true, but I don't know for sure.
And I think it's funny that he said, they were able to do the stuff I want to do back when film was started, and you're telling me we can't do it now in 1992?
That's the attitude that we need in big movies nowadays, because people are so lazy. They don't think about how they can do something. They just say, we'll do it in computers later.
We'll film it in post. And I think of John Carpenter because I know that's something that always annoyed him during the making of his movies that he directed. We look at John Carpenter movies, especially things like The Thing and The Fog, of having these awesome practical effects. But it was something that they had to butt heads with him because he just wanted to get things done. He was like, why are you taking so long to do all that? Who cares?
And you can see in his later movies, he just doesn't do that anymore. I mean, he hasn't really been making movies lately, but even toward the end of when he was still making movies, you get a bunch of dumb CGI and stuff.
If one person doesn't pass out from inhaling KY jelly or whatever Rob Bottin did, then it's not a John Carpenter movie. I watched Oldboy, but the 2013 American version with Josh Brolin. And I had seen the original version, which I didn't realize there was a 10-year gap in between those.
Yeah.
I thought Spike Lee made his maybe a year later or something. Why you would wait 10 years to make the same movie, I'm not sure.
But a shittier version.
And I think it's funny that he calls it a reimagining. Because there's nothing new about it. He didn't add any imagination to it.
Yeah, I've seen enough of the remake to know that I don't want to see any more. I saw the fight scene, the famous one-take shot, which he turned into just a stupid sequence.
Right.
Oh, man. I don't think Spike Lee is a very good filmmaker. I guess I've only seen a couple of his movies, but we have this big hardcover book of his that just came out that just says Spike really big on the cover. It reminds me of the Will Smith book that just says Will, but then it also has a picture of his face.
Yeah, you know what my review of that book was? Won't. Speaking of Winona Ryder, I watched Edward Scissorhands from 1990, which it's been a long time, but it's a really sad movie. And Tim Burton has said this himself, but it's the movie that's the most him, and it feels that way. And Danny Elfman has said that too, and you can tell because there's a lot of bongos in the score. I think that's also an example of a quote-unquote kids movie. I think it's more of a family movie, but, for kids too. But it's not afraid to shy away from darker elements.
Yeah, it definitely has a fairy tale kind of feel to it.
Yeah, it's been described as a modern fairy tale, and I think that kind of works.
Yeah, I mean, you think about fairy tales, and they often have dark material in them.
I think Johnny Depp does a really nice job too. It reminded me of Leon the Professional, where Jean Reno also has very few lines, but you pull a lot out of that character. Stan Winston doing those effects, that was cool.
Vincent Price's final role.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how Vincent Price, we look at his career, because he was typical horror stuff, but then he kind of moved into like the quirky old man type roles.
Yeah.
But his contemporaries, you think of like Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, never made that transition. They were blowing up planets and murdering children or whatever those hobbits were all the way to the end.
I mean, I think Vincent Price has always had a different feel than those two did. Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing are often playing intimidating characters, but Vincent Price often is kind of the weird guy.
I agree with that. So Christopher Lee has also, I know we're sidetracking a little bit here, but Christopher Lee has the most fascinating life. Have you ever looked into that?
Yeah, like hunting down Nazi agents and stuff, and yeah.
Yeah, there's that one story from Lord of the Rings when Saruman gets stabbed in the back, and Peter Jackson was directing him on what he should do, and Christopher Lee was like, "Do you know what it sounds like to hear a man stabbed in the back? Because I do." And it was like, damn. I don't know if that's true, but that's awesome. I'm going to do a separate video on the next movies I'm talking about, because I'm slowly going through them, but I decided to get into the holiday season. It's December. So I'm in the process of watching all of the Halloween movies. So I watched 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 so far, and my goal is to watch all of them, including the weird spin-off Rob Zombie ones. Going so far, I didn't realize some of them had such huge year gaps between when they were made. In the Myers series, going between Halloween 2 and Halloween 4, there's a 7-year gap there. And then between 5 and 6, there's a 6-year gap there. And those are so closely related too. And that's all I watched this month. I read The Essential Spectacular Spider-Man Volume 3, which I was thinking, these are going to be pretty lame because it's like a spin-off Spider-Man. But they were actually pretty dang good. I was surprised. I don't know if the rest of them are like that. I know there's some Web of Spider-Man ones. There's some The Mediocre Spider-Man. I don't remember what they're called. So it was early 80s. There's a lot of Bill Mantlo and Roger Stern. There's some really good art in here. And there's some more weird villains popping up here. The Gibbon. And Silvermane shows up. It's when he becomes a robot, I think. Cloak and Dagger show up for the first time in these, which was cool. They were cool pretty much from the beginning. And then there were some goofy ones, like there was this kid who idolized Dr. Octopus, and he was really smart, so he built his own octopus backpack thing.
Okay, I've heard about that story.
But then Spider-Man runs into him and just beats the crap out of him, and he goes, "Oh, this isn't Dr. Octopus after all."
Does that really happen?
Yeah. But of course, there's the female drama angle coming in there. I think it's Deborah
Whitman.
Yeah, and she's convinced that Peter is Spider-Man, because he is, and she ends up going crazy. That seems to be a recurring theme in these Marvel comics I'm reading, is some female going crazy and ending up in an asylum. Because that happened with the Iron Man one I read last month.
Did that happen with Daredevil's love interest, Heather or whatever? This might be a spoiler, but I know she ends up hanging herself.
Oh, jeez. It was interesting. I might check out another volume of that. I played Doom 3, which I have not played before. I remember seeing the cover and thinking, it looks very generic, but I really like it. It definitely feels like, especially in the opening, it's going for a Half-Life type of thing. Have you played it?
I probably made it about halfway through before my Xbox died.
I like the development of the story through the audio logs and emails that you get. And I really like how you can listen to those audio logs while you're walking around. You don't have to sit there and listen to it for, 3 minutes without moving.
Yeah, it was kind of ahead of its time in areas like that, because that's a lot more common now.
And this is the BFG edition. So everything, all the textures have been reskinned. Everything looks a lot nicer than it did when it originally came out on PC.
Does it still do the thing where no matter where you shoot an enemy, it does the same amount of damage? Like it always takes 6 bullets to kill somebody, whether you're shooting them in the head or in the foot?
I don't think so.
Okay, because that was a big problem I had with the Xbox version.
One thing I don't like is in the original version, you could not have a gun and your flashlight out at the same time, which added to that sense of dread.
Yeah, when people complained about that, I always just shook my head and said, "Wow, you don't get it."
It reminds me of when Zombie U came out for the Wii U. When you were looking through your backpack for supplies and stuff, you did that on the gamepad, and the TV, you couldn't see what was happening, and you could get attacked. And people were also complaining about that, that's the mechanic. It's supposed to build a sense of suspense, and people were like, this is too suspenseful. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I only played through the main campaign. I haven't done the extra stuff, but I probably will.
Do the human characters still look like monsters?
How so?
I'm going to assume the answer is no then, because you would know what I was talking about. In the Xbox version, every human character, just looking at their face, they just look like a monster.
What they really remind me of is Time Splitter character models, the way they move and the way their faces move when they talk. And it was the first reimagining of Doom.
I will say the slower pace and more kind of atmospheric feel to Doom 3 definitely appeals to me more than the super fast-paced, just shooting everything style of the newer ones.
Well, when it came out, people were expecting a run and gun because that's kind of what Doom 1 and 2 were. You know, you did the speed runs. And the fact that it was more atmospheric was cool. But I think that's part of what hurt it too. And that's why the 2016 one went in a more frantic pace.
Not my thing.
On the opposite end, I also played Paper Mario. Which I had played on the 64, when it came out. And it's an interesting RPG. It's unique enough. It has a lot of character. And that's the start of that whole series, because I know there's a bunch of Paper Mario games now, even coming out on the Switch. It was seen originally as a spiritual successor to Super Mario RPG, which is a much more traditional feeling RPG. And I think if I had to choose between the two of them, they're so different, but I would choose Super Mario RPG. I think the story of Paper Mario, I think the humor, I think the mechanics, it all works very well together.
Which one has Dennis Hopper, though?
That's the unreleased game based on the movie.
Was there really an unreleased game based on the movie?
I wish. Oh, man, that would have been so cool. They could have pulled a Street Fighter the game, the movie the game.
Yeah. Because, I know it wouldn't have been produced by Nintendo, but I could imagine, as part of the deal for the movie, a licensed game or something.
Yeah, be a CDI game. And that's pretty much all I did this month.
Well, we can look forward to your Halloween video then.
Yeah, Halloween 1 through 68 or whatever we're at now.